Hi, I'm Beth with American Patchwork and Quilting, and today I'm sharing tips for sewing Block 2 in our Bright New Day Block of the Month. This is a free Block of the Month program, so if you haven't grabbed that pattern yet, check the video description for the link to download those instructions. Block 2 uses strip sets to put together the 4 9-patch units. Strip sets are a really great way to save time while quilting and are used in many different patterns, so it's a great technique to learn. Making strip sets means you sew together longer strips first and then subcut the piece strip into smaller units. It's an efficient way to piece a lot of smaller units, and it can be much more accurate. Speaking of accuracy, it's really important to get precise cuts on these strips or your strip set is not going to turn out well. I know sometimes when I'm cutting with my rotary cutter and ruler, I get a little slip at the end and my cut is not quite straight. So I love using my AccuQuilt and a strip cutting die for doing strip sets. These dies are so versatile. They come in a variety of widths. You can cut strips, squares, even diamonds with the same die. So I have my 1.5 inch width here, and I'm going to show you how to cut your strips with it. The great thing about these is you can cut several layers at once. So I can cut both the colors that I need at one time. So I've layered those, and I'm just going to line them up on my die. Just make sure that they're straight on there so that we're going to get 3 strips. And grab my cutting mat, lay it on top, and then I'm using the Go Big, which is electric, so this is going to just pull this through for me. I don't have to do any cranking. So give it a little rub when you're done, and then you want to slide the mat off. That helps prevent the static having the fabric stick to that mat. So now we have our 3 perfectly cut strips of each color. Next, it's time to sew the strips together. It's always a good idea to test your seam allowance before you start sewing all your strips. So I have 3 of the 1.5 inch strips. I sewed them together, and then I take my ruler and just double check that that center strip is exactly 1 inch wide. If you find your center strip is not measuring quite an inch, try switching to a scant 1/4 inch seam when you're sewing your strips together. We have a bunch of tips in the Block 1 video for that scant 1/4 inch seam, and I'll link that in the video description. Pressing is another really important part of getting accurate strip sets. So when you're pressing, don't use steam, and also try to avoid pulling on the strips because both of those things can cause a little bit of distortion on your strips. Press in a smooth motion, and again, avoid pushing too much on it to avoid that distortion. It's also a really good idea to press after each individual strip rather than sewing all 3 together and then pressing them as one unit. I'm ready to subcut my pieces. So the first thing that you want to do is cut one of the edges so that you have a nice square spot to start. You can see some of these are a little uneven, so you definitely want a nice clean edge to be measuring from. As you're cutting, be sure to line up the center strip with the lines on your ruler too. This can help you keep it nice and straight and square. Time to sew our 9 patches together. So the seams should nest really nicely together on these units. And if you want to, you can pin the intersections, but I find as long as you're watching and kind of holding those as they go through the machine, it should be okay. I've finished sewing my 9-patch blocks together, and now I'm ready to assemble my entire block. So lay it out according to the diagram and pay special attention to the direction of the triangle squares. It's really easy to reverse one of those and not realize it until you've sewn your whole block together. Start assembling the block in the center with the 9-patch units, center square, and rectangle strip sets. Then sew the side pieces. Attach the short sides to the center first, then attach the long sides to complete the block. Here are the 2 color options. This first one uses Happy Days by Sherry and Chelsea for Moda fabrics. And I've used this floral in the center so that I could fussy cut it and feature that design. And the second one is made with Strawberry Honey by Gracie Larson for Riley Blake Designs. I wanted to use a color for the background of this one for a little bit of a different look, so I used this pink dot, and I think it really is fun. One thing to note when you're selecting fabrics for this block of the month is that a lot of the blocks have smaller pieces. Like this 9-patch unit ends up with 1-inch squares. So typically you'd want to save the smaller scale prints for something like this, and the larger scale prints you'd want to use in the bigger pieces so that you don't lose that design when you cut it up really small. Join our private Facebook group so you can share your block and see even more different colorways. It's been so fun seeing everybody's different blocks and all the fabrics being used. So you can join via the link in our description and also find the pattern download there too. I can't wait to see your version of Block 2.